could be more festive than sparkly sequins? Hello my lovelies, welcome back to my channel and I hope you've had a really fabulous week. In today's video, which is part 2 in my Make, Do and Mend series, I am going to be showing you how I made this sparkly sequin top out of a sparkly sequin dress that didn't fit me. Although the dress was really beautiful, it was a sample left over from my bridal design range. I wanted to use the fabric and make something that I could wear. I have a little drinks do tonight, a Christmas drinks do with some lovely girlfriends, so I decided to make this top. It's inspired by these 1940s blouses that were very popular throughout the 40s and early 50s, and it's a shape I really love. I show you how to draft this pattern over on my Patreon channel, so if you'd like to join me over there and come on some sewing adventures, then please head over. I've popped the link below and I'd love to see you in my sewing school. This sparkly number is a sample from my bridal range, and it's a really beautiful rose gold sequin, or squeakwins as I call them, full length, and it's a size 10, so doesn't fit me at all, but it's incredibly beautiful. I wish it did fit. So I'm going to change it and turn it into one of my T-block tops, which is the very first lesson over on my Patreon. I show you how to draft a T-block pattern to your own measurements, and I'm going to be using it to make a sparkly version for myself. First of all, I have to undo the side seams so that I'm able to actually lay the pattern onto the fabric as I need to. The sequins are all sparkling and twinkling in the candlelight, which makes this a very pleasurable experience. And I'm listening to Hugh Grant's reading of A Christmas Carol, and this is making me feel very festive indeed. And of course Loki approves of this sparkly loveliness. The pattern for this T-block has been ever so slightly tweaked from the one over on my Patreon. I've just taken it up a little bit, taken off a bit of the side seam because there's a lot of ease in this pattern, and I've just made the arm less long or shorter, which is the other normal way of saying it, but why say it normally when you can say it in a silly way? So this is the back. There's a seam. I haven't undone this because there's no point. Basically I've got just enough to be able to cut this out, and I'm just going to check that it fits on the front as well, because otherwise I might have to do a bit of jiggery pokery to make that one work. I decided not to use my best scissors to cut out the sequin fabric. It's a net backing with an all over sewn on sequin, so it doesn't unravel or unthread, and you can also sew over this because it's got very small and soft sequins. So it's a really good choice of sequin fabric. How many times can I say sequin? If you're a little bit scared of using something like this, there are fabrics that you need to do special processes with, like unravelling and tying in ends and so on, but this one's very straightforward. But I didn't want to ruin my best scissors, so I cut out the front and the back, and then the next thing is to start sewing. When using sequins, you have to accept there is sequin carnage. I really love about this particular top, this T-block that I do, is that it is just such a simple sew. It's literally pin it at the shoulder line, and then if one can, and then pin it, I don't know why I've done it on the other side, but pin it on the side seams, and then you just sew them. But I just wanted to double check because I cut this pattern originally with a certain amount of ease, just to check that this is going to fit. I've laid it flat, and I'm just measuring from where the seam allowance to seam allowance is, so like thus. And I know that this is 24.5 inches flat, so all in all that would be 49 inches wide. So I know that that's going to fit my bust, which is my most plumpous bit. And just to double check before I start sewing, because it is an unfitted bigger item of clothing, but what I'm hoping to achieve is that sort of 1940s look with it and style with it. So it's a bit of an experiment, but I think I'm looking forward to it. And I've got a couple of decisions to make, because this is all, you know, the sequins are on that side, and then they're all in sort of embroidered, or like they've been sewn onto this net backing, which might be a little bit itchy on the skin. I'm wondering whether I line this fully, so just bag it out with a lining, or whether I just do what I would normally do, which is, you know, overlock. Although with this, because it's on a net, it's not going to fray, so I don't need to do that. And I'd bias bind the neckline and maybe the armholes, so I've got a decision to make. You can see it's very oversized, so actually I could have sewn it a little bit smaller. It's quite see-through. It's not actually too, it's not too itchy at all, but the idea is that it gets cinched in and it gives you that grown on sleeve 1940s dolman sleeve style. But it could definitely have been a little bit smaller, but that's fine. But it's nice and sparkly, so I think I'm going to line it. I've sewn a lining, just exactly the same pattern, out of this ivory satin, and I need to press the seams open, which you can do on this fabric. But then I just realised that on the sparkly one, I mean, you can't really press it, and even though I could finger press the seams, they're always going to kind of sit up and do, like, regain their erectness, shall we say. So this is one of those moments where you need to make a bit of a decision. Now I know if I just leave that and it just keeps doing that, it's going to affect the way the top looks and then how I feel about wearing the top, which means that I'm not going to really be wearing this, and I really want to. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to hand fell like a very rough stitch to flatten these seams, which is something that I do a lot with certain types of wool and garments that have got a thick seam. That Loki's coming along to join in, and it just keeps the seams flat in a fabric that is resistant to behaving. So I'm going to do that, and then I will be able to bag out the top, and then it's really more or less done. I finished stitching the seams flat. I just used like a general felling seam. So they're all going to lie flat now and not make the seams bulky. It's a really clever little trick, although to be honest it does take a little bit of time. But this top is so quick to sew that I don't actually mind doing the more labour intensive stuff. And at the end of the day, I want things that I'm going to wear time and again, because you can wear sparkly tops every day for sure. I've sewn and ironed this, and what I need to do is place these right sides together, and I'm going to pin and sew around the neck. So I matched the shoulder seams first of all, both shoulder seams, and then I pin in the middle of the centre front and the middle of the centre back, and then I pin the rest of the neckline around. And what this means is if there's any kind of ease or discrepancy between the size of the necklines, because different fabrics behave in different ways, I'm able to make sure that the fabrics go together and are distributed evenly, so when you sew you get a nice even sew. I should have said when I started sewing my sparkly top that when I'm sewing with a sequin fabric, I use a ballpoint needle, and generally I use a size 14 ballpoint needle, which is a type of needle that you would use for jersey. It just seems to work. Maybe it's because this fabric is actually a net with the sequins sewn on. I'm not sure, but it works every time. Now I'm going to do an understitch around the neckline, or some people I suppose might call this a stay stitch. I'm not entirely sure. I've always called it an understitch. And basically what you do is you sew the seams, both seams of the fabric, onto the lining, or if you were doing a facing, you would sew them onto the facing with just an edge stitch from that seam. And what this means is that the neckline or the seam lays nice and smoothly and you don't get that rolling or bumpiness. Some people tend to top stitch round necklines, but personally I don't think this gives a very nice finish. And here is my sequin T-block top done. I thought that I had filmed the rest of it, but I was so engrossed and listening to A Christmas Carol that I didn't. This is still pulling a little bit. I haven't actually pressed this yet. I will be pressing it from the wrong side in a minute. I've left the hem raw because the fabric doesn't fray, but I did a turn and turn hem on the lining just to neaten that, and that makes the lining just a little bit shorter than the outer, which is what you want. And then I sewed the lining to the sequin fabric by machine, and I basically did right sides together and sewed it on the inside up through the lining, which probably makes no sense. You could of course just hand stitch this. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want to spend more time with me in my little cottage by the sea, then please do subscribe. I'd love to have you join me for my sewing adventures. I'm nearly always interrupted by my cat, so if you like cats and sewing, then this is the place to visit every Thursday, where I aim to make the world a better place one stitch at a time, and I would love it if you could join me for that journey too. Wherever you are in the world, my lovelies, I hope you're keeping safe and well, and that the festive season is bringing you some much needed good cheer. I shall see you next Thursday in my little cottage by the sea for some more sewing adventures. Till then, bye!